It all started a few months ago, though I didn't realize it at the time. Life had been relatively normal for me and my wife, Emily, for years. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and everything seemed perfect. We got married young, and as the years passed, we built a home together. A quiet, comfortable life, or so I thought. For some time, however, I had noticed subtle changes in Emily's behavior. It wasn't anything that immediately raised red flags, but it began to gnaw at me. She started spending more time on her phone, texting late at night, and when I asked her who she was talking to, she'd always brush it off with a quick, "Just work stuff." It seemed harmless at first. People get busy, right? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how different she'd become. I used to be her priority. She was always there to listen to my day, make plans, and share hers. But in the last year or so, those moments felt fewer and farther between. She was distant, less interested in our conversations, and when we did spend time together, it felt like she wasn't fully there. She was always distracted, either scrolling through her phone or staring blankly at the TV. One night, I got home late from work. Emily was in the living room, on her phone again. I didn't think much of it, but something about her demeanor seemed off. When I sat down, I noticed she quickly minimized the screen. It was a small thing, but it stuck with me. Later that night, I tried to talk to her about it gently, not accusing, but she got defensive. "Why are you so paranoid?" she snapped. "It's nothing. You're overthinking it." I told myself it was just a phase. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The tipping point came one afternoon when I accidentally came across a text message that had been left open on her phone. It wasn't just any message, it was an intimate conversation, one that wasn't meant for my eyes. I knew it wasn't just friendly banter. It was clear they had crossed a line. I didn't confront her right away, unsure of what to do, but I couldn't stop replaying those words in my head. My stomach sank. From that moment on, the weight of suspicion only grew heavier. I tried to act normal, to pretend like everything was fine, but I couldn't ignore the evidence I had seen. It felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But I needed proof. I needed to know for sure before confronting her. I had to see it with my own eyes. Little did I know that the search for the truth would change everything. The more I dug, the deeper the hole got. Chapter 2, Unraveling the Lies. The days that followed felt like I was living in a fog. I couldn't think straight. The more I tried to go about my daily routine, the more my mind circled back to that message. That one text. I knew something wasn't right, but part of me still wanted to believe it was just a mistake, a miscommunication. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but my gut was telling me otherwise. I decided to do what any person in my position might do. I started snooping. I wasn't proud of it, but the doubt had taken root, and I needed answers. The next time Emily went to take a shower, I found myself standing in front of her phone, heart racing. I felt guilty, but I also felt desperate. I hesitated for a moment before unlocking it. She always kept it on a simple pin, nothing complicated. What I found, however, shattered whatever was left of my trust in her. There were texts. Dozens of them. Messages exchanged between Emily and a man I didn't recognize. They were full of flirtation, hidden innuendos, and even plans to meet up. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't just a friendly connection. They were having an affair. My head spun. I couldn't understand how I missed this. How could Emily, the woman I thought I knew inside and out, do this to me? My hands shook as I scrolled through more messages. It wasn't just a one-time thing. These conversations had been ongoing for months, maybe longer. Each message, each detail painted a picture of a side of her life that I hadn't known existed. I couldn't breathe. I felt like my whole world was crumbling around me. But as I dug deeper, I noticed something else. Something even more damning. There were pictures. Pictures of her with this man. They were taken at restaurants, in parks, even at his apartment. Some of them were innocent, some not so much. I felt a deep sense of betrayal. How could she have been so careless, so disrespectful? She was living a double life, and I had been blind to it. As I stared at the screen, a wave of anger and sadness washed over me. But then something else stirred inside me. I wanted answers. I needed to know why. What had driven her to do this? Was I not enough for her? Did I miss something along the way? I couldn't just sit on this information any longer. I had to confront her, but I wasn't sure how. I couldn't predict how she would react, whether she would break down in tears or deny it until the end. The uncertainty gnawed at me, but the one thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't keep living in this lie. When Emily came out of the shower, I was sitting in the living room, holding my phone in my hand. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. She looked at me, expecting our usual small talk, but I couldn't hide what I now knew. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but sharp with an edge I didn't recognize. She froze, her eyes widening, a deer caught in headlights. Her face turned pale, and I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. For a moment, it was like time stood still. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I didn't give her the chance to lie. "I know," I said, my voice breaking, "I know about the affair. The texts. The pictures. Don't try to deny it." Her expression faltered, and she slowly sank down onto the couch next to me, her shoulders slumped in defeat. For a long, painful moment, there was silence between us. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, barely audible. My mind was reeling. This was it, the moment of truth. Would she come clean, or would she try to spin this into something else? My heart was heavy with the weight of it all. Chapter 3, The Confession. I sat there, staring at her, waiting for her to say more. The silence between us was unbearable. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears, a constant reminder of the shock and betrayal that had just shattered my world. Emily didn't look like the woman I had married. She seemed smaller, as if the truth was too much for her to bear. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke again, her voice trembling. "It started a couple of years ago. I don't know how it happened. It was a mistake at first, something harmless. But it grew. It became more than that. And I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. I felt like I'd been slapped." The words hit me like a freight train, knocking the wind out of me. A mistake? How could she call it a mistake when she'd kept it going for so long? My mind raced as I tried to piece everything together. "How long has it been going on?" I asked, barely able to control the quiver in my voice. Emily looked down, avoiding my gaze. "A year. Maybe more. I don't remember exactly. It was gradual, but once it started, it just kept happening. And I kept lying to you. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. But I knew I was." I felt the weight of her words press down on me. A year. Over a year. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't some random mistake. She had been hiding this for so long, lying to me, betraying me with every day that passed. I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand more answers, but all I could do was sit there, my chest tight, the rawness of it all choking me. "Why?" I finally managed to ask. "Why did you do this? What was I doing wrong?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. She wiped her face with the back of her hand before looking at me, her expression a mix of guilt and sadness. "It wasn't about you, really. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't that I didn't love you. I do. I always have. But I felt lost. Like I wasn't myself anymore. Things changed, and I didn't know how to fix it. So I looked for something to fill that void. Someone who made me feel seen, someone who listened when you didn't. It wasn't about you being bad or neglectful, it was about me not being able to deal with my own issues. And instead of talking to you, I found comfort somewhere else. I felt the anger boiling inside me. This wasn't just a simple case of miscommunication or a one-time lapse in judgment. She had made the choice to deceive me, over and over again, and that made everything worse. My mind swirled with 1,000 questions, but I couldn't seem to ask them all at once. So you just kept lying? I said through clenched teeth. You kept seeing him, knowing that it was destroying what we had. How long were you planning on keeping this up? Until I found out. Emily broke down, her shoulders trembling with sobs. I didn't want you to find out. I didn't know how to stop it, how to fix it. And I didn't want to lose you. I kept thinking I could end it, but every time I tried, I'd fall back into it. I couldn't break free. And I kept telling myself I could be the same person you thought I was, but I wasn't. I wasn't being honest with myself, let alone with you. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how she had destroyed everything I thought we had. But instead, I felt numb. The anger was there, but it was mixed with something else: deep disappointment, confusion, and a sorrow I hadn't expected. How long has it been going on with him? I asked, my voice now quiet, almost resigned. Do you love him? She shook her head, her face filled with shame. No. I don't love him. It wasn't about love. It was a way to escape. A way to feel wanted again. But I love you. I always have. I made a terrible choice, and now I'm paying the price. The weight of her confession hung heavily in the air. The truth was out, and I didn't know how to process it. I felt lost. The woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize, someone who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I wanted to run. To leave. To walk away and never look back. But I couldn't. Something inside me refused to give up just yet. I still loved her. I still cared about her, even though it felt like she had torn my heart apart. The question now was, could we move forward from this? Could we rebuild something from the wreckage of our marriage, or was it too late? Emily reached out, her hand trembling. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please, give me a chance. Let me prove that I can change. I'll do anything. I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw the weight of her regret. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: this moment, this conversation, would change everything. The decision I made in the days to come would determine whether we had a chance at healing, or if our relationship was beyond repair. But in that moment, all I could think about was how much I had lost. Chapter 4, The Crossroads. The days that followed Emily's confession felt like a blur, a hazy fog that I couldn't shake. I went through the motions of daily life, but nothing felt the same. Every time I saw her, I felt the weight of her betrayal, the lies that had been woven into the fabric of our relationship. The love I thought was unshakable now seemed fragile, broken beyond repair. Emily tried to make things right. She apologized, repeatedly, with tears in her eyes and guilt in her voice. She promised she would do anything to prove that she was sorry, that she was committed to fixing what had been broken. But the more she spoke, the less I knew what to believe. The trust had been shattered, and words, no matter how sincere, didn't seem to be enough to patch it together. I couldn't stop thinking about the time we had lost. The years we spent together now seemed tainted by the secrets she'd kept hidden. Every memory, every moment I had thought we shared, was clouded by the reality of what had been happening behind my back. How much of our life together had been a lie? The hardest part was the uncertainty. I didn't know whether I could ever forgive her. Part of me wanted to, but another part of me felt like it would be impossible to erase the image of her with him, the man who had become a part of our lives without me knowing. Could I ever trust her again? Could I ever look at her the same way? I spent hours thinking, trying to figure out what I wanted, what was best for me. Emily kept asking for another chance, but I wasn't sure I even wanted one. I had my own doubts, my own fears, and deep down, I wondered if the love we had once shared was enough to overcome the hurt she had caused. There were moments when I would look at her, and all I saw was the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had been my partner, my confidant. And then there were moments when I could only see the betrayal, the years of lies, and the affair that had poisoned everything. One night, after another round of apologies and promises to change, I finally had to ask the question that had been lingering in my mind since the moment I found out. Why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you come to me before it got this far? Her face crumpled as she tried to hold back tears. I was scared, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't know how to tell you. I was ashamed. I thought I could fix it on my own. I thought if I just ignored it, if I just kept pretending, maybe it would go away. But it didn't. And now I'm paying the price. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she was truly sorry, that she was capable of change. But how could I? How could I ever be sure that I wouldn't find myself in this exact same situation a few months, or even a few years, down the road? The hardest part was knowing that even if we tried to move forward, things would never be the same. The foundation of our relationship had been cracked, and no amount of apologies or promises could fix it completely. I was no longer the person I had been before I knew the truth. And I didn't know if I could ever go back to being the person I was when I first fell in love with Emily. We spent a lot of time talking, or at least, she did. Emily told me about how lonely she had felt, how distant we had become over the years, and how her own insecurities had driven her into the arms of someone else. She told me about how it started as an emotional connection that turned into something more, and how trapped she felt in the web of lies she had created. She told me that the affair was a symptom of deeper issues, ones that neither of us had addressed. I listened, but it didn't make it easier. I still couldn't shake the feeling that something had been taken from me, something irreparable. I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't know if we could rebuild what we had, or if it was even worth trying. But one thing was certain, I needed time. I needed space to think. I needed to figure out who I was now, and whether or not I still had a place for Emily in my life. The day I decided to leave the house for a while was the hardest one. I told Emily that I needed time to clear my head, that I couldn't make any decisions while I was still so hurt and confused. She begged me to stay, to give her a chance to prove she could be the woman I once loved, but I knew that staying would only make things harder. We couldn't fix this under the same roof. I stayed with a friend for a few weeks, trying to make sense of everything. Every day, I fought with myself. Part of me missed her. I missed the life we had before everything fell apart. But another part of me was terrified of trusting her again. The thought of her with someone else haunted me. Through the silence, I began to realize that this wasn't just about Emily, it was about me, too. It was about my own worth, my own sense of self. I had to ask myself if I could live with the betrayal. Could I still love her after everything? Or was this the moment when I had to let go of a relationship that no longer fit who I was becoming? When I finally returned home, Emily was waiting for me. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. But this time, there was no pleading. No more promises. Just a quiet, sad acceptance in her eyes, as though she knew this could be the end. And for the first time, I realized that I wasn't sure which way I was going. I could forgive her, and we could try to rebuild. Or I could walk away, leaving behind everything we had once shared. Both paths seemed equally terrifying, and neither felt right. I didn't know what would happen next. All I knew was that I was at a crossroads. And no matter what decision I made, it would change my life forever. Chapter 5, The Choice. The days following my return felt like an endless cycle of internal turmoil. I was exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally. Every time I thought I had clarity, I was pulled back into the mess of emotions and unanswered questions. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think straight. My mind kept replaying moments of our life together, the early days when everything was easy, the times we laughed together, the dreams we once shared. But all of it was now overshadowed by the betrayal that hung between us. Emily tried to be patient. She gave me space, but I could feel her eyes on me constantly, watching me, waiting for some sign that I was ready to make a decision. She had already expressed her willingness to do anything, to go to therapy, to change, to work through the problems that had led us to this point. And in her own way, she seemed genuine. But sincerity didn't erase the fact that she had crossed a line I couldn't easily forget. I spent hours reflecting on what had led us here. We had both contributed to the breakdown of our marriage. Emily's affair was an extreme reaction, but there had been cracks for a while, things left unsaid, emotional distance, the subtle erosion of intimacy. But that didn't excuse what she had done. She had made a choice. She had chosen someone else. She had betrayed me, not once but many times, and that was something that wasn't so easily forgiven. But still, the question lingered, could I ever forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? Could I go back to the person I was before I knew the truth, or was that version of me gone forever? One evening, as the tension in the house thickened, Emily finally asked the question I had been dreading. What do you want to do? Where do we go from here? I had no answer for her. How could I? I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know if I even could make a decision. I wasn't sure if I still loved her in the way I once had, but I didn't want to make a rash decision either. I needed time, but the longer I waited, the more the weight of it all crushed me. I took a walk to clear my head. The autumn air was cold against my skin, but the crispness of the evening felt grounding. I wandered aimlessly through the streets, not sure what I was searching for. I only knew that I needed to be alone, to find some sense of clarity amidst the chaos of my thoughts. As I walked, I thought about the future. I thought about what life might look like if I chose to walk away from Emily. I thought about how I'd have to rebuild my life, figure out who I was without her by my side. It terrified me. The thought of being alone, of losing the life we'd built together, filled me with a deep sense of sadness. But I also thought about the possibility of healing, of being free from the weight of betrayal, of rebuilding a life on my own terms. Could I find peace in that? But then, I thought about the alternative. What if I stayed? What if I forgave her and tried to rebuild? Could I really trust her again? Could I ignore the memories of the lies, the whispers of doubt that would follow me every time she was on her phone or out of sight? Could I truly forgive her? Or would I always be wondering if she was hiding something? I realized something then. The hardest part wasn't making a decision, it was understanding that there was no perfect answer. There was no way to guarantee that things would be the same, no way to fix everything. But I couldn't keep torturing myself with indecision. I needed to choose a path, even if I didn't know what the future would hold. When I returned home, Emily was sitting on the couch, her face weary from the past few days of uncertainty. She looked up when she saw me and waited for me to speak. My heart ached as I looked at her. I saw the woman I had loved, the woman I had married, but I also saw the pain she had caused. I've thought about it, I said, my voice steady but thick with emotion. And I've realized that there's no simple answer. There's no easy way to fix this. She nodded, her eyes searching mine, hopeful yet resigned. I know, she whispered. I just want to make it right, somehow. I took a deep breath. I don't know if I can forgive you, Emily. I don't know if I can ever trust you the way I used to. I don't know if I can forget what you've done. She flinched, but she didn't argue. She had no defense for it. But, I continued, the words heavy on my tongue, I also don't want to give up on us. I don't know if we can rebuild what we had. I don't know if I can move past this. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give us a chance, if you are. If you're willing to do whatever it takes to prove to me that I can trust you again. Emily's face softened, and for a moment, I saw the woman I had once known, the woman who had been my partner in life. I will, she said, her voice full of sincerity. I will do whatever it takes. I'll show you every day that I'm committed to earning your trust back. But I understand if it's too much. I understand if you need to walk away. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made. But I knew I couldn't move forward without taking that step. Could we truly rebuild our marriage? Could we move past this? Only time would tell. The road ahead would be difficult. It would require patience, healing, and a lot of hard work. There would be moments of doubt, moments when I would question my decision, moments when I would wonder if it had been worth it. But I had made my choice. And for better or worse, it was the one that I felt was right in that moment. We had a long road ahead of us, and I couldn't say what the future held. But for now, we were trying. We were both trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces and rebuild something from the ruins. And for the first time in a long while, that small glimmer of hope made me feel like maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. Chapter 6, The Road to Healing. The days following my decision felt like we were treading water, both of us trying, but neither of us quite sure how to swim. I had agreed to give Emily a chance, but the reality of what that meant started to settle in. The hurt, the doubts, the insecurities, those things didn't disappear overnight. In fact, they seemed to linger, like an unwelcome presence in our home. Emily and I tried to talk. Really talk. The kind of conversations we hadn't had in years, the kind we had avoided in favor of surface-level interactions or brushing things under the rug. But now, with everything exposed, it felt like the only way forward was through the discomfort. We started attending therapy, both individual and couple sessions, hoping that it would help us navigate the mess we were in. The first few sessions were brutal. There was no sugarcoating it. I had to confront the emotions I had buried for so long, the anger, the sadness, the betrayal, and Emily had to face the consequences of her actions. It wasn't just about the affair anymore, it was about everything that had led to it, everything we had ignored or neglected in our relationship. The therapy sessions felt like a mirror, showing us both the flaws in ourselves and in the marriage we had built. But it was also revealing that there was still something worth saving, even if it wasn't the same as before. The hardest part wasn't just facing the truth, it was learning how to trust again. Every time Emily picked up her phone, every time she was late, my mind would race with suspicion. I found myself asking questions I never used to ask. Where were you? Who were you with? It felt like a betrayal of my own, questioning her every move, but the truth was, I wasn't sure how to stop. Trust had been shattered, and it didn't feel like something I could just turn back on like a light switch. It took time. And time felt like both a friend and an enemy. Emily was patient. More patient than I thought she could be. I saw her trying, really trying. She would reassure me, not just with words, but with actions. She was transparent with her phone, with her whereabouts, with her emotions. She did everything in her power to prove that she was committed to fixing the damage she had done. And it wasn't easy for her, either. She had to face the shame of her actions, the guilt that weighed heavily on her heart every time she saw the hurt in my eyes. But she stayed. She didn't run away, didn't make excuses. She was there, showing up, even when it was hard. But I still wasn't sure. There were days when I could feel the glimmer of hope, when I could see the woman I had once loved, the woman I wanted to believe she still was. And then there were days when the doubt would creep back in, when the images of her with him would resurface in my mind like a bad dream. I couldn't erase the past. I couldn't forget what had happened, no matter how much I wanted to move on. One evening, as we sat together in silence after another long conversation, I realized something. Healing wasn't going to come in a single moment or a single decision. It wasn't something we could rush or fix with a few grand gestures. It would take time to rebuild the pieces of trust that had been torn apart, time to learn how to communicate better, to learn how to love each other again in a way that felt safe. And maybe, just maybe, we would never be the same. But that didn't necessarily mean we couldn't be something new. The question I kept asking myself was, what am I willing to fight for? The truth was, I wasn't just fighting for Emily or our marriage, I was fighting for myself, too. I was learning how to heal, how to rediscover my own sense of worth outside of the betrayal. I didn't want to stay in this toxic cycle of doubt and resentment forever. I wanted to find peace again, whether that meant healing together or moving on separately. But right now, the only thing I could control was my own journey. Emily and I had our moments of connection, small victories in the midst of the mess. We laughed again. We shared memories. We were reminded of why we had fallen in love in the first place. But there were also moments of deep sadness, of lingering distrust, of wondering if we would ever get back to that place where everything felt easy and right. But I had to admit something to myself. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I wasn't sure where this road would take us, or if it would lead us to the same place we had once been. But I was willing to try. I had to be. Not for Emily's sake, but for mine. I needed to know that I had done everything I could to rebuild, to restore, to heal. And if we couldn't do that together, then I would have to find peace in knowing I gave it my best shot. One day, as we sat together on the couch after a particularly emotional therapy session, I looked at Emily, really looked at her, and I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: vulnerability. She was no longer the woman who had hidden behind lies and deception. She was the woman I had married, the one who had been broken, too, but who was willing to face her demons and fight for what we still had. "Do you think we can get through this?" I asked, my voice raw. "I don't know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I want to. I want to fight for us." I nodded, not sure if I believed it was possible, but willing to try. The journey ahead was still uncertain. There would be setbacks, there would be days where we both felt like we were moving backward instead of forward. But we were still here, still trying, still choosing each other. And for now, that was enough. We had a long way to go, but for the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a future for us, one where healing could happen, and where the past wouldn't completely define us. But it wouldn't be easy. It would take work, trust, and a lot of patience. And maybe, just maybe, it was worth it. Chapter 7, The Test of Time. As the weeks turned into months, Emily and I started to fall into a new rhythm. The constant tension that had once permeated our home began to fade, but it wasn't gone completely. We still had our struggles, moments where old wounds would reopen, and the hurt would flood back. But there were also signs of growth. Slowly, but surely, the walls between us started to come down. Therapy helped. It gave us a safe space to express the things we had been avoiding for so long. We learned to communicate better, to be more vulnerable, to listen without getting defensive. But even with all the work we were putting in, it was clear that healing was not linear. Some days, I felt like we were making progress, and other days, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still stuck, still trapped in the past. The hardest part for me was the lingering doubt. No matter how hard Emily tried to prove herself, there was a part of me that couldn't let go of the past. Every time she stepped out of the room, a small voice in my head would ask, where is she going? Who is she with? It wasn't just paranoia, it was the residue of betrayal. Trust was not something that could be rebuilt overnight. It was a slow process, one that often felt exhausting and painful. One evening, as we sat together on the couch after another long day of work, I found myself staring at her, lost in thought. She caught my gaze and gave me a small, uncertain smile. "What's on your mind?" she asked softly. I hesitated, unsure of how to put my feelings into words. "I don't know," I said quietly. "Some days, I feel like we're getting better. But then other days, I'm not so sure. I still feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." Her expression softened, and she reached out to take my hand. "I understand. I know I've broken your trust, and I know it's not something I can fix in a day or even a month. But I am here. I am here, and I'm not going anywhere." The sincerity in her voice hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, like she truly understood the gravity of what she was asking for. She wasn't just asking for forgiveness, she was asking for time, for the chance to show that she could be the partner I deserved. And in that moment, I realized something: forgiveness wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't an event or a decision that could be checked off a list. It was a continuous process, one that I would need to choose again and again, every day, if we were to have any chance of moving forward. I took a deep breath, squeezing her hand. "I'm trying, Emily. I really am. I know I still have a long way to go, but I want to keep trying too." She nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "I don't want you to feel like you have to rush, or like everything needs to be perfect. I'm not expecting that. I just want you to know that I'm not giving up. And I'll keep doing the work too." It wasn't a magical fix, but it was enough. For the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were on the right path. It wasn't going to be easy, and I still had doubts. But I was willing to keep trying. And so was she. But just as I was starting to feel a sense of hope, life threw another challenge our way. I was at work one afternoon when I received a call from Emily. Her voice was shaking, and I could tell something was wrong. "I need to talk to you. It's important." I felt a sudden panic rise in my chest. "What's going on?" I ran into someone," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Someone from my past. It's my ex." The air felt heavy as I processed what she was saying. I wasn't sure why it bothered me so much, but it did. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's fine. I promise," she said quickly. "We just talked. It was unexpected, but it was a quick conversation. I just wanted to tell you because I didn't want to keep it from you." I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy, a flare of insecurity. It wasn't logical. I trusted Emily now, or at least I was trying to. But this her ex felt like a test, one that I wasn't sure I was ready for. "Are you sure it's fine?" I asked, my voice betraying my anxiety. You're not thinking about him, are you?" Emily paused. "No. I promise you, I'm not. It just threw me off. I haven't seen him in years, and it was weird, I guess." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But that old voice inside me, the one that had whispered doubts and suspicions ever since the affair, was loud again. Was she really over him? Was she really committed to me? "I'm sorry," Emily said, sensing my unease. "I didn't mean to make you feel like this. I just thought you should know. It took everything in me to push past my insecurities, to trust that she was being honest. Thank you for telling me, I said, trying to steady my breathing. I guess I still have some things to work through. But I appreciate you being upfront. We didn't talk much after that. I needed time to process what had happened. The conversation with her ex had been brief, and I knew that Emily wasn't interested in rekindling anything. But in that moment, I felt the reality of our situation sink in. This wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. It was about learning how to navigate the complexities of trust, even in the smallest of things. I spent the evening reflecting on what had happened. I realized that this would never be easy. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt in a perfect, linear way. There would be moments of doubt, moments where the past would flare up again, but the only way forward was to keep choosing each other. The road to healing was far from smooth, but I had come to understand that it wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. And as long as we kept working, kept being honest with each other, I believed we could find our way through it. For now, we were taking it one day at a time. And that was enough. Chapter 8, The Breaking Point. I thought we were past the hardest part. But I quickly learned that healing wasn't a linear journey. It wasn't just about the occasional doubt or an uncomfortable moment. It was a constant battle against the past, against my own insecurities, against the ghosts of our former selves that we couldn't entirely shake. There were days when Emily and I were in sync, when it felt like we were building something new, something stronger. We'd have a conversation that felt real, where we both opened up in ways we hadn't in years. We'd laugh, talk about old memories, and even plan for the future. For a moment, it felt like the cracks that had once threatened to split us apart were slowly healing. But those days were sporadic. For every moment of connection, there was a moment of tension. It was as though our old wounds were waiting, just below the surface, ready to resurface with the slightest provocation. One of those moments came on a Thursday evening, about a month after Emily's encounter with her ex. We had planned a quiet dinner at home. We were both tired from the week, Emily from work and me from a personal project that had consumed my time. But as we sat down to eat, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. Something wasn't right. Emily seemed distracted, her eyes not quite meeting mine, her movements slower than usual. It was like she was holding something back. I put down my fork, suddenly aware of the tension in the room. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice sharp despite myself. "You've been off all night." She hesitated, her fingers nervously twirling the napkin in her lap. "It's nothing," she said, but I could tell it was something. I could feel the distance, the shift in energy, and it scared me. "Emily, please," I pressed. "Talk to me. What's going on?" Her face softened, but she still wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's just. I've been thinking a lot lately. About everything. About us. About the future." I felt my heart race in my chest. "What do you mean? You're not thinking of leaving, are you?" She shook her head quickly. "No, it's not that. It's just. I've been feeling overwhelmed. With everything we've been trying to fix. It's been hard, and sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough to prove myself to you. I don't want you to feel like I'm not trying. But it feels like. I don't know. Maybe I'm not enough." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. The weight of her confession left me speechless. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the guilt, the vulnerability. I wanted to comfort her, tell her that everything was going to be okay. But I also couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that we were teetering on the edge of something we couldn't come back from. "Emily," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what to say. I know you've been trying, but there's still so much. I'm still struggling." I'm still angry. And I'm still scared. The truth of it hit me hard. I was scared. I was scared of losing her, scared of never being able to trust her fully again, scared that this fragile attempt at healing would crumble into nothing. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose what we have. But I can't keep doing this if you're still holding back, if you're still holding on to all that hurt. I need to know that you're in this with me. That we're in this together. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the raw emotion that mirrored my own fears. But at that moment, I didn't know if I could give her what she needed. I didn't know if I was ready to let go of the pain, the anger, the betrayal. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. The weight of everything hung between us, suffocating the air, leaving no room for resolution. I'm not sure if I can, I finally said, my voice trembling. I don't know if I can move past this. I don't know if I can give you the trust you need. And I don't want to keep hurting you by pretending I can. The tears that had been in her eyes began to fall, and my heart twisted at the sight. She reached out, taking my hand, but I couldn't bring myself to hold it back. I was so torn, so exhausted from carrying the weight of everything. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to make you feel like this. I know, I said, but my words felt hollow. But you did. And I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I even want to anymore. The words hung between us like an unspoken truth. Neither of us had said it outright, but we both knew, we were at a crossroads. A breaking point. And I didn't know if we could come back from it. After that night, things felt different. The conversations we had were strained. We tried to talk, tried to work through it, but there was a wall between us now, one that neither of us knew how to tear down. The doubt that had plagued me before returned with full force, and it seemed to consume everything we tried to rebuild. I couldn't help but wonder if we were holding on to something that had already broken beyond repair. It wasn't just Emily I was unsure of, it was myself. I didn't know if I had it in me to forgive her, to let go of the anger, to trust again. I didn't know if I could give her the space to heal, when I was still so wounded myself. We both needed time. But in the silence that stretched between us, I feared that time wasn't going to heal us, it was just going to pull us further apart. The weeks that followed were a blur of uncertainty. We were stuck in limbo, trying to figure out if we could make it work, if we even wanted to. We kept going through the motions, going to therapy, having the tough conversations, but it felt like we were running in circles, never truly getting anywhere. And as the months went on, I found myself at another crossroads. Was it time to walk away? Was it time to stop pretending we could make it work when the foundation was too cracked to support the weight of what had happened? I didn't have the answer, and I was terrified of making the wrong decision. The pain of leaving, the pain of staying, it all felt unbearable. But somewhere, deep down, I knew the truth: we both had to find our own way. Whether that meant together or apart. And that was the hardest part. Knowing that, no matter how hard we tried, the future wasn't certain. All I knew for sure was that I couldn't keep living in this limbo. Something had to give. But what? Chapter 9, The Final Decision. It had been 2 months since that fateful dinner, and everything felt like it was hanging by a thread. Emily and I had been living in the same house, sharing the same space, but emotionally we were miles apart. There were no more arguments, no shouting matches, but there was an undeniable distance between us. A coldness that neither of us knew how to bridge. I found myself asking the same questions day after day. Can we fix this? Is this worth saving? I had tried to tell myself that things would get better with time, that we were just in a rough patch, but the truth was that I had no idea where we were heading. Our marriage felt like a ship that was drifting, without a captain, heading for uncertain waters. Work had become my refuge. I threw myself into it, focusing on deadlines, meetings, and projects. It was easier to focus on something concrete, something that didn't require me to confront my feelings. But as soon as I came home, the silence was deafening. Emily was there, but it felt like we were strangers. We spoke, but the words felt hollow. We were both going through the motions, trying to convince ourselves that we could go on, but deep down, we both knew that things weren't the same. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. Emily sat across from me, her face tired, eyes downcast. Neither of us had spoken for what felt like hours. Finally, she broke the silence. "I think we need to talk." Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. I looked at her, unsure if I was ready to hear whatever it was she had to say. But I knew that we couldn't keep avoiding this forever. "What about?" I asked, my tone guarded. She swallowed hard, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. "I think we both know that things aren't getting any better. I feel it, and I know you do too." I nodded. "Yeah. I've been feeling it too." She exhaled, her voice trembling. "I don't know how much longer we can keep pretending that we're okay. I don't want to make the decision for both of us, but I think we need to be honest about where we're at." I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me. I had been trying so hard to avoid this conversation, trying to avoid the moment when we would have to face the reality that maybe, despite all our efforts, our marriage was beyond saving. "You're right," I said, my voice rough. "We can't keep going on like this. It's not fair to either of us." Emily's eyes welled up with tears. "I don't want to give up. I don't. But I also can't keep living in this uncertainty. I can't keep wondering if we're ever going to get back to where we were. I think it might be better for both of us if we let go." The words hit me harder than I expected. Let go. Those two simple words felt like a punch to the gut. All the hopes, all the promises we had made to each other, all the dreams of a future together, it felt like they were slipping away in that moment. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't want to give up either, but I don't know if we can keep going like this. I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything is fine when I'm still so hurt, still so scared. And I know you're feeling the same way." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I've hurt you so much. And I hate myself for it. I never meant to, but I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if we can fix it." There was a long silence as we both processed the gravity of what we were saying. It felt like our entire relationship was hanging on the edge of a cliff, and neither of us knew how to pull it back from the brink. I wanted to believe that we could find our way back to each other. I wanted to believe that we could rebuild from the rubble of our past, that the love we had once shared could survive all the betrayal and pain. But the reality was, I wasn't sure anymore. And Emily wasn't sure either. "I think we need a break," I said quietly, the words coming out of my mouth before I even realized I was thinking them. Maybe we need some time apart to figure out what we really want." Emily's eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might object. But then, she nodded slowly, as if the weight of my words had finally sunk in. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we do need to figure this out on our own." We sat in silence again, the weight of our decision settling over us like a heavy fog. The future, which had once seemed so clear, was now a vast, uncertain landscape. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if we would ever find our way back to each other. But for the first time in months, I felt like we were finally being honest with ourselves. That night, Emily packed a small bag. She didn't say much as she moved through the house, gathering a few things. I didn't say much either. We both knew that the next few days would be a time of reflection, a time to step back and try to understand what had gone wrong, and if there was any way to fix it. When she left, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief because, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was suffocating in the constant tension. But sorrow because it felt like the final chapter of something that had once been beautiful, something that I had hoped would last forever. I spent the next few days alone, trying to process everything. I spent hours thinking about the past, about how we had gotten here, about the person I had been before all the betrayal and hurt. I thought about Emily, about the woman she had once been to me, the woman I had loved with all my heart. And I wondered if that person was still there, buried beneath the mistakes and the pain. I wondered if, after all this time, there was still a chance for us. But I also knew that I couldn't hold on to something that wasn't working. As much as I had wanted to fix things, to go back to the way things were, I had to admit that maybe the best thing for both of us was to let go. When Emily came back a few days later, we sat down again, this time without the pressure of pretending everything was fine. She looked at me, her eyes tired, but there was something different in them, a sense of acceptance. "I think we've both had time to think," she said softly. "And I think we both know what we need to do." I nodded, my heart heavy. "Yeah. I think it's time." We didn't say much more. There was nothing left to say. The love was still there, but it was no longer enough to overcome the cracks that had formed between us. The decision was made, and we knew it was for the best. We weren't angry anymore. We weren't blaming each other. We were just two people who had loved each other deeply, but who had reached the end of the road. The next few months were difficult, but in time, I began to find peace. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew that I had made the right decision for both of us. And maybe, just maybe, this would be the first step in finding healing, whether separately or, in time, together again.